I used to think silence meant peace. Now I know it can mean two people slowly letting go without saying goodbye. My name is Margaret. I'm 74 years old as I sit here speaking to you, and I was married to my husband, Daniel, for 45 years. That number sounds solid, like a stone house that can't be moved. But a house can look strong from the road while the rooms inside grow cold. The first changes were so small I almost felt silly noticing them. Daniel stopped reaching for my hand in the grocery store. Not in a cruel way. He simply walked a half step ahead, like he was following a path only he could see. At night, he would turn his body toward the edge of the bed, and I would tell myself it was just his back, just his hips, just age, just comfort. In the mornings, the kitchen light would come on, pale and tired. I'd hear the soft click of the kettle, the scrape of his chair on the tile, and then nothing. No, good morning, Maggie. No little comment about the weather. Only the newspaper opening like a slow curtain between us. I would stand at the sink, hands in warm water, listening to the quiet as if it was normal. We still did all the married things. We paid bills. We went to weddings and funerals. We sent birthday cards with both our names, written in my handwriting. He fixed things around the house. I cooked. We smiled when people called us a good couple. Sometimes I smiled too hard, like I was trying to hold the story together with my teeth. There were moments I remember clearly because they felt like a question I refused to answer. One evening I came into the living room wearing a sweater he once said made my eyes look bright. He didn't look up from the television. Not once. I stood there a few seconds longer than I needed to, as if waiting for recognition, like a stranger hoping someone would say her name. Then I turned and folded laundry instead. I told myself he was tired. Work had worn him down. Men didn't talk the way women did. Marriage was meant to be steady, not romantic. I repeated those lines like prayers. But the truth, even then, was simple and frightening. I was living beside the person I loved, and I was starting to feel alone in my own home. The signs were quiet. I ignored them quietly too. That is how it begins, not with shouting, but with the slow acceptance of less and less until less feels like the only language you know. Loneliness inside a marriage is a special kind of ache because you can't easily explain it to anyone. People think loneliness means no one is there. But Daniel was always there. He was there in the hallway, in the garage, in the sound of his cough behind the bathroom door. He was there in the way he placed his shoes neatly by the mat. And still, I missed him like he had already left. I started keeping my feelings in small hidden places, in the pause before I opened the front door, in the minutes after he fell asleep, in the way I watched his face when he laughed at something on the news, and I wondered why that same warmth never reached me anymore. Resentment doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it arrives like dust. It settles slowly. It makes everything look dull. I would wash the dishes and think, I have done this for decades. I would iron his shirts and think, he doesn't even notice the smooth color. Then I would hate myself for thinking it. I would tell myself I was ungrateful because he never hit me, never drank too much, never disappeared. But my heart would whisper, is that all I was meant to be grateful for? We began living separate lives while sharing one address. Daniel had his routines, his favorite chair, his quiet hours. I had mine, church groups, grandkids' school plays, phone calls with my sister where I pretended everything was fine. When he spoke, it was about practical things. The car needs oil. The neighbor's tree is leaning. We should get a new lock. We became experts at discussing life without touching it. There were nights I wanted to say, "Do you still love me?" And the words would rise up and then sink back down, heavy with fear. Fear of sounding needy. Fear of hearing the wrong answer. Fear of making him look at me with that flat expression that said, without saying, "Why are you making this hard?" So I became skilled at swallowing. I swallowed my sadness with coffee. I swallowed my anger with polite smiles. I swallowed my needs until I forgot how to name them. I told myself marriage meant sacrifice. I said it like it was noble. But inside, it felt like I was disappearing a little more every year. The strangest part was that I could still remember the beginning. I could still see us young, dancing in a dim hall, his hands warm on my waist, the smell of his cologne mixed with cigarette smoke from other people's coats. I could still hear his laughter when we first painted our little kitchen and got paint everywhere. That memory lived in me like a photograph kept in a drawer. And sometimes I would wonder, quietly, if I was married to a man or to a memory. I didn't understand then that love can become silent not only from lack of feeling, but from fear. And for 45 years, we both chose the safety of not speaking over the risk of being real. The night I knew something was truly wrong wasn't dramatic. It was ordinary, which made it worse. Daniel had gone to a routine appointment, the kind you go to at our age because your friends start dropping strange words into conversations: biopsy, scan, marker, stage. He came home with a thin folder in his hand. He placed it on the kitchen table like it weighed more than paper, then walked past me into the bedroom without saying a single thing. The house felt different after that, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stood under the yellow kitchen light, looking at the folder. My hands were damp from peeling potatoes. There was still a knife on the cutting board. Life was sitting right there, half finished, as if it expected to continue the same way. I opened the folder with the slow care of someone touching a bruise. The words were simple enough to read, but they didn't feel like English. My eyes kept returning to the same lines, trying to make them softer by reading them again. Then I heard him cough in the bedroom, a small sound, and something in me cracked. I walked down the hallway and stopped at the doorway. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with his shoulders rounded, staring at the floor. The lamp beside him threw a warm circle of light, but it didn't reach his face. He looked older than I had ever allowed myself to see. In that moment, it hit me with a kind of cold clarity. We were running out of time, and we had already wasted so much of it. Not just years, moments, chances, words we never said because we thought we could say them later. I sat in the armchair by the window after he fell asleep. Outside, the street was quiet. A porch light across the road stayed on, steady and indifferent. Inside, the clock ticked like it was counting something I couldn't afford. I held the folder in my lap and watched Daniel's chest rise and fall in the dim room. He looked peaceful, but I felt panic because peace can be mistaken for distance. I had been making that mistake for decades. I thought about my own age. I thought about how people tell you 60 is still young, but your body doesn't believe it. I thought about how you can still cook dinner and laugh with your grandchildren, and yet know, deep down, that there are fewer springs ahead than behind. And then I felt the fear that comes before regret. The fear that one day I would be standing at a graveside, holding a coat collar against the wind, and realizing I never truly let my husband know me. that I never truly asked to be known. I looked at his sleeping face and I realized something painful. I wasn't just afraid of losing him. I was afraid of losing the chance to finally be honest. That was my breaking point. Not the diagnosis alone, but the understanding that love without truth becomes a slow kind of loss. The next morning, I made tea the way I always did, but my hands were shaking. The cup warmed my palms, and the steam fogged my glasses. Daniel sat at the table, quiet, his eyes fixed on nothing. The space between us felt wide enough to fall into. I sat down across from him, and I didn't let myself escape into chores. I didn't stand at the sink. I didn't tidy. I stayed in the chair like I belonged there. Daniel, I said, and my voice sounded smaller than I wanted. I read the papers. He didn't flinch. He just nodded once, slow. I don't want to do this the way we do everything, I told him. I don't want to pretend we're fine while we're breaking. He swallowed, then whispered, I didn't want to scare you. I leaned forward. The table was cold under my forearms. You scared me for years, I said, and the honesty surprised even me. Not with anger, with distance, with how quiet you've been. I felt like I was living next to you, not with you. His eyes finally lifted. They were wet, and that shook me more than shouting ever could. I thought, he began, then stopped. His hand trembled slightly as it reached for his cup. I thought you wanted it that way. You always looked so capable. You didn't ask for much. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half grief. I didn't ask because I was afraid you'd turn away. I didn't want to beg my own husband to see me. For a long time, we just sat there. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Ordinary sounds holding up an extraordinary moment. Then he said, very quietly, I did love you. I love you. I didn't know how to get back once we drifted. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. His skin felt thin, warm, familiar. We could have learned, I whispered. We could have learned if we had tried. His breathing changed after that conversation. The illness moved quickly, like it had been waiting for the truth to surface. I sat beside him in hospice days later, the room dim and still, the curtains barely stirring. The air smelled like clean sheets and something faintly chemical. He was smaller in the bed, but his eyes were clear. He squeezed my fingers with what strength he had left and said, Maggie, don't waste what's left. He paused, and his voice broke. Not like we did. Those were his last words to me. And they changed everything, because they didn't let me hide behind the story I had told myself for 45 years. So if you're watching this and you're over 60, please hear me. Time is not only about years. It's about courage. Don't wait for a hospital room to say what you need to say. Sit at the table. Turn toward the person beside you. Ask the hard question with a soft voice. Let love be real while it can still be answered. I can't redo my 45 years, but I can tell you the truth of them. And maybe that is how Daniel's last words keep working in the world, through a woman who finally learned that silence is not the same as peace.